Inter Miami wins without Messi. The Galaxy are setting new standards for a post-championship hangover. Americans experience highs and lows in a wild European weekend, and which American cities could be our soccer Londons. That and more on this Monday morning Kickaround. Hello, everybody. Jason Davis, all by my lonesome today on a Monday. Robert Kerr, otherwise indisposed, but we soldier on. We're going to do a big show for you today, diving into a lot of things that happen on the weekend because it's Monday, and that's what you do on a Monday. You try to catch up on everything that went down. Plus, we'll kind of get into some bigger questions here. I got some interesting things that popped into my head over the last couple of hours, as a matter of fact. Since you're here, please give us a like and a subscribe and follow us and do those things to help out the show. I think we're creeping towards 1,500 followers, subscribers rather, on YouTube. And the more we add, the better we can bring you this product every single Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And I got some thoughts about expansion, so keep that coming. And if you can help us out by telling somebody, that would be really, really nice. You can follow us on Blue Sky, on X, and Instagram at Kickaround. Just go search for that. If you want to send us an email, you can do that quickly at morningkickaround@gmail.com. I'll check the inbox and see what we got in there. If you have an idea for a story we should cover, and we are obviously very American soccer focused here on Morning Kickaround, and you'll get a taste of that today, let us know, right? Send us an email and tell us what you think we should be talking about. If you want to throw us a couple of bucks to help the show along, you can do that on Ko-Fi at ko-fi.com/morningkickaround. Other ways to support the show will be coming, I promise. All right, so with all that business done, and now that you're adjusted to just seeing my face here, and I'll tell you about my jersey, which we tend to do here on Morning Kickaround. I'll get into that a little bit later when we do a bit of a USL Roundup. Why don't we just get this underway? Let's start it off. Let's do long balls on a Monday. All right, here we go. Monday's morning long balls, Monday's morning kick around long balls. There's some headlines that we want to get to on this episode of the show. Starting with Major League Soccer, it continues to be interesting. The beginning of this MLS season, we had some results here that I'm going to throw up on the screen that kind of get into some surprises, I guess, when it comes to the way the MLS season has started. 3 match days into the regular season campaign. And looking at this, what stands out to me is that Seattle Sounders 5-2 victory over LAFC. Now, both of these teams obviously involved in some extra league competitions, the CONCACAF Champions Cup. So a little bit of a different approach, perhaps, in terms of rotation and things like that for Brian Schmetzer and Steve Cherundolo. And these teams, they have a history. For a while, the Sounders couldn't beat LAFC. They did last year. Managed to get to that Western Conference final before losing to the Galaxy, and they just went off in this game with 5 goals. But as I said, rotation part of the story for both sides. Denis Bouanga was the substitute. That tells you a lot about what Steve Cherundolo was thinking about. Ryan Hollingshead came off the bench in the second half. Rusnak, Morris, Alex Roldan, Christian Roldan, all those players on the bench to start the game for the Seattle Sounders. You did have Masovsky coming off early, which allowed Rusnak to come on. He picks up a couple assists and a goal. So a big win for the Sounders, but tough to know what it means, sort of big picture. I'm going to skip over the goalless games. Disappointed to see Atlanta and Red Bulls give us nothing. Peru and Houston Dynamo give us no goals as well. The Union keep their good season start off to they keep their good season start going, rather, with a 2-0 victory over New England. I think it's going to be pretty bad. I think New England's pretty bad again. And I caught a post from Matt Doyle over on Blue Sky where he said maybe it's time to start asking questions about Caleb Porter in New England. And my response was start. I think we've been doing that. A little bit of surprised to see Caleb Porter get another chance in New England after what happened last season. And here they are having a pretty poor start to the season. Ty Ty Barrybo with another goal. I think is that 6 on the year? Do I have that number right? 5 goals, excuse me. It was 4 through the first 2 games, rather. Now it's 5 through 3 games for Ty Barrybo, the Israeli striker for the Philadelphia Union. I think we were all kind of down on the Union after their decision to part ways with Jim Curtin. But it looks like Bradley Carnell's got them going in the right direction. That high press system is paying dividends for the Union. NYCFC with a victory over Orlando. Colorado goes down and wins in Texas 1-0. Chicago beats Dallas. Maybe neither one of those teams with big expectations. Of course, Dallas bringing in Lucha Acosta means things change dramatically from an offseason that looked pretty bad. Chicago rebuilt under Greg Berhalter, still a work in progress. They gave up an early goal and then found 3 to win that game. Last one being a penalty kick, I think is a little bit questionable for me. But the thing about Dallas is not only are they rebuilding the team, they're rebuilding the stadium. I think it probably missed some people's notice. Probably some people didn't realize what was going down there in Frisco. They're putting a roof on the building, like all the way around, I believe. And for the next couple of years, that place is going to hold like 11,000 people. They had 11,000 out per FOTMOB at this game in Frisco, and it's not going to be a great atmosphere in Frisco, Texas. Not that it ever really was. I don't think FC Dallas was ever held up as a place you really wanted to, or you really worried about going on the road, except for the heat. They were always good at home because of the heat in the summertime. Chicago with the victory. Nashville 2-0 over the Portland Timbers. I'm not saying it's time to ask questions about the Timbers' direction, and they did spend some money, and there's going to be a betting in process, but I don't know how much people will give Phil Neville patience in Portland. San Diego, 3-1 winners over RSL. Don't know what to make of RSL, right? They've had a couple of poor performances and a victory that stood out over Seattle. And then San Diego, starting off the season unbeaten, starting off their existence unbeaten. 3 games, 7 points, plus 4 goal differential. The only game where they didn't win and didn't score was against St. Louis City. So they've now beaten the Galaxy. We'll get to them in a second. And they've beaten Real Salt Lake. Vancouver 2-0 over Montreal. Quakes fall to Minnesota United at home. I think Minnesota United's going to be pretty decent this year. Obviously, the Quakes had a good start through 2 games, but they hadn't played anybody decent, I don't think. Again, RSL, maybe not one of the best teams in the West. Inter Miami 1, Charlotte 0, and this game notable because Lionel Messi again did not start. We knew that going in. I think there was word ahead of the game that Javier Mascherano was not going to play Lionel Messi from the beginning, but he was a substitute. He was on the bench, but then he never got to play because Inter Miami went down a man via a red card. They're making this a habit now, playing down 10 men, and they still end up winning the game. The goal from Allende in the 46th minute. He had the red card to Oscar Ustari, the goalkeeper, as he had come way out and ends up committing a foul on Ajamang. But Charlotte unable to find the goal, and so Inter Miami wins again, despite the red card. We don't know about Lionel Messi. Again, healthy enough, fit enough, rather, to be on the bench, but doesn't get off. Does that mean he's ready to start when they go down to Jamaica and play Cavalier in that second leg of the CONCACAF Champions Cup? Remember, they have a 2-0 lead from the first leg. They maybe didn't deserve it, but I think a lot of people thought Lionel Messi, maybe would be playing a little bit more than he has been so far. I don't know. What is the right approach to a 37-year-old player when he's as big as a name as he is? And we've already had a little bit of that controversy over him not playing in Houston and people having bought tickets. Buyer beware, right? Go ahead and buy your tickets, but be careful. The Galaxy losing 3-0 at home to St. Louis City. Well, the Galaxy setting new standards for a post-championship hangover. I mean, we watched them have to dismantle that team, or rather the logic was they had to dismantle that team because of the budget issues that Major League Soccer presents. And what's fascinating is that, yes, the Galaxy are bad, but no one is really blaming them. Will Kuntz put together a championship team last year and got praised for it. He's the guy that has to oversee the changes that now the Galaxy are dealing with as they are 0 for 3 on the new season. 4 games, actually, if you include the CONCACAF Champions Cup, that they've lost already this season. Are they set for a historically bad year following a playoff campaign? We've had teams, I mean, in the recent past, we've had teams win championships and miss the playoffs the next year. Could the Galaxy be the next one? And instead of it being, oh, they failed here, will this be a focus on Major League Soccer and the rules and how the league doesn't know what it's doing or is hurting good teams and preventing teams from maybe putting together multiple great seasons, which could, depending on your viewpoint, attract more attention, get more people to pay attention to the league if they know, hey, year to year, we're going to watch a team be great. All right, let's talk a little bit about the Americans abroad weekend. Christian Pulisic getting back to good form against AC Milan. I mean, with AC Milan in a win that they desperately needed. Obviously, Milan is going through a bunch of stuff, and already talk about Sergio Conceição losing his job there in Milan. Christian Pulisic scoring a penalty kick and then scoring a goal to help AC Milan to a 3-2 victory. It was not all great, though, in Italy for Americans. Obviously, Juve is also kind of going through their own period of frustration. Sitting in fourth place in the table, 4-0. They lose at home, 0-4, if you want to be technically accurate, to Atalanta. I believe that's one of the worst home defeats that Juve has ever suffered in Serie A. And you've got Thiago Motta now saying things like, we can't imagine the Scudetto anymore. I don't think they were really contenders for the Scudetto, but absolutely. You lose at home that way to Atalanta. And Weston McKennie, part of the problem, part of the reason that Juve loses 4-0 with the handball that leads to the penalty kick. And I suppose you could say that was the start of everything going south for Juve. And if not for Weston McKennie's handball, maybe it's a different day for Juventus. I do think Atalanta's a better team overall than Juventus, and we're seeing Inter and Napoli set the standard in Serie A. Milan down in 9th place. Again, the win breaks a three-game losing streak, rather. So you had the own goal to set up Milan's comeback, but then Pulisic from the penalty spot, and then the back post run to score the goal that helps Milan. I don't think there was ever, for me, I was never overly concerned about the Christian Pulisic situation at Milan. Because although there was that question of whether or not Conceição was botching it by playing João Felix through the middle and preventing Christian Pulisic from being in his best position, and you wondered if that was going to continue, and if Pulisic wasn't producing when he was on the field in a position, in that right wing position or wherever he was lining up, would there be sort of justification for keeping him out of the lineup, or would this end up being something that ultimately caused his time at Milan to go sour the way things went sour at Chelsea? And I think we can all be forgiven for having a little bit of a doom and gloom mentality about Christian Pulisic because of what happened at Chelsea. But he's still an excellent player. He can still do things like he did. Okay, Lecce's no great team in Serie A, but those are still tough games. And again, they were down 2-0 before the comeback began. You saw João Felix come off the bench in this game, whether that was a rotation thing, a managing minutes thing from Conceição, or if that was a recognition that he needed something different because João Felix through the middle, starting at that 10 position, hadn't been working. I don't know. I hope that we will see sort of the development of this. Rafael Leao came on as a second-half substitute, which changed the game. Alex Jimenez sacrificed for him. Maybe that's also a management issue. Minutes management. Leao, of course, is a frustrating player who can sometimes look world-class and other times kind of be pretty poor. But he did make a difference. He had the assist on Pulisic's winner, which allowed AC Milan to win that game. Elsewhere, when it comes to American abroad, Serginho Dest returns to the field for PSV Eindhoven. It's too late for him to get into the U.S. men's national team for the Nations League. Not on that 60-man preliminary roster, but obviously a big moment for him. He is such an interesting player for the U.S. men's national team because he's so good going forward, but you worry about his defending. Obviously, he had the blow-up in Trinidad, and we've got this sense that is Serginho Dest a player the U.S. should have on the field when he is healthy. His technical ability is, you cannot argue against it. He's obviously an incredibly technically gifted player. But I do think Pochettino is going to have some questions to ask when Sergiño Dest is 100% healthy and the U.S. men's national team has meaningful games. And we're still a year out from the World Cup, a year plus. So maybe there will be some time for him to figure those things out. It would have been nice to see Sergiño Dest in the team for the Nations League, if only to force Pochettino to have to deal with that particular issue of whether or not he trusts Sergiño Dest to be one of his guys and to start at right back for the U.S. men's national team. Josh Sargent scored again for Norwich City in the championship. I believe that is something like 8 in 8 for Sargent. And now with the U.S. men's national team getting ready to play these Nations League finals, it is impossible to imagine that Josh Sargent is not the starting center forward for the U.S. men's national team when they take the field against Panama. And that's partly due to injury. Ricardo Pepi out injured, and Florent Balogun coming back from injury and not ready for this. And nobody else really stepping up. I know Haji Wright is back on the field as well, but there doesn't seem to be anybody pushing Josh Sargent. And maybe that's a bad thing in your mind if you don't trust Josh Sargent to be the starting center forward for the U.S. men's national team. He is talented, but it hasn't always shown up when he plays for the United States, when he puts on that U.S. shirt. But I think you have to acknowledge the season he is having in the championship. Scored in the 5th minute against Oxford United. If you're wondering, Norwich is drifting a bit, 49 points, 10th position in the championship. They got a long way to go if they want to make it into those promotion playoff positions. They are 6 points back of West Brom, who is currently holding the last playoff spot, with Bristol City, Blackburn, and Middlesbrough between Norwich and West Brom. So they not only have to, pick up some points, and they've got. It looks like they've got 6 points out of the last 4 games, and that's just not going to do it in the championship, especially when teams like Coventry City are on heaters and just winning games hand over fist at this point. So again, whether or not Josh Sargent will get a chance to play in the Premier League and level up next season may depend on Norwich City getting promoted, although I think it's always a reasonable possibility that his form and the goals that he is scoring will get him an opportunity to maybe move up via transfer. 25 years old. Let's not forget he's still a fairly young player, Josh Sargent. I'd love to know if people are excited to see Josh Sargent in the U.S. men's national team. Let me know in the comments. Are you somebody who thinks this is the moment for Sargent to grab his opportunity when the U.S. plays Panama and whoever next, hopefully after beating Panama in the Nations League final? Again, Florent Balogun at his best is an enticing prospect, but he hasn't been at his best, and he certainly hasn't shown up enough for his club team to give us full confidence that he's going to turn that over into a national team performance. We know what Ricardo Pepi can do when he comes off the bench for PSV Eindhoven, and he's played pretty well for the United States when given the opportunity. But he's still not the complete product because of the club situation that he has. And there's really nobody else, again, sort of at that same level where you're talking about, I'm really excited to see what that player can do. Agyemang is still a young player playing in Major League Soccer, has yet to score in the 2025 season. Maybe that's not the end of the world, but again, I think we got a little bit overexcited because of the goals that he scored in the January camp. Outside of that, it kind of becomes questionable. I mean, again, I mentioned Haji Wright in the championship. If Daryl Dike was back healthy and completely fit and scoring goals, maybe we'd be talking about him, but that's not where he is. Again, it's been a difficult run for him fitness-wise, or his health. He came on as a substitute, Daryl Dike, for West Brom in a 1-0 win over QPR on Saturday. So he's getting back on the field, but he's not ready yet. And until we see a long run of Daryl Dike playing significant minutes and scoring goals, he can't be the guy that we imagine starting for the U.S. And remember that Daryl Dike is 24. And we have a bunch of guys in this 22 to 25 range. Agyemang is 24 years old. I mean, we're not talking about 18, 19-year-olds who are making a case for themselves and look like they're ready to make the jump. We're talking about players who should already be sort of fully formed goal-scoring center forwards if they're going to give you the kind of goals you need for the U.S. men's national team. All right, and long ball number 3, we have to acknowledge the start of the 2025 USL Championship season. I'm wearing my Sacramento Republic shirt. One of them, actually got a couple of them. Sacramento's where I was born. Didn't spend much time there. I was only there for a couple of months before my dad moved on when he was in the U.S. Air Force. But I do I do have some pride for Sacramento, and obviously in the USL Championship, Sacramento is a notable team. They got a win this weekend. They finished 5th last year out west, so looking to get back into the mix for a championship in 2025. Getting a opening day win is always obviously a big deal. Got to get the season started off well. We had Lexington in their first game ever in the USL Championship beat Hartford Athletic. 2 goals for Lexington at home as they get a win. Hartford's still trying to figure it out. So let's not suggest that Lexington took down one of the heavy hitters in the USL Championship. That is not who Hartford Athletic is. Miami FC falling at home to Detroit City, who gets off to a good start with a 2-0 win. North Carolina and Pittsburgh play to a draw. Charleston Battery losing at home to Louisville City. I imagine Louisville City is going to be another contender again for a USL Championship. That's fun to say. A USL Championship for Louisville City potentially. Birmingham Legion falling at home to Loudoun United 3-1. San Antonio beats Monterey Bay 1-0. El Paso Locomotive and Colorado Springs. Of course, Colorado Springs, the defending champions. 2-2 in El Paso. Phoenix Rising falling at home to FC Tulsa. Could have won that one too, but I wasn't born in Tulsa. I was born in Sacramento, hence the choice. Orange County, also got one of those. I got a shirt for Orange County. 4-2 winners over Oakland Roots, and I have an Oakland Roots shirt. I'm just going to mention all the USL Championship shirts I have. So maybe the teams that I don't have a shirt for, will ship one out to your boy, and I can rep that on the show. I mentioned that Sacramento Republic 2-1 victory over New Mexico United. Penalty from Cicerone and Jameson scoring as well for Sacramento. Hurst on the other side. New Mexico United, always interesting club to me. They've built a community. They seem to be doing something nice in New Mexico. And, of course, we've been talking a lot about the USL Championship recently because of the announcement of a potential D1 league run by the USL. We were getting into which clubs might fit the profile of a Division I club when USL gets that off the ground. If you haven't watched those videos, go back and watch them. There's one on picking the 12 teams. We talked to John Morrissey about building that league. We also went back and talked about what we might have gotten wrong when it comes to USL Division I clubs in year one. And, of course, there's also expansion. We hit all the expansion notes, or as many as we could, in a video on the USL Championship. By the way, I think I didn't mention Boise in that video, and somebody in our comments reminded me that Boise might have a project getting off the ground. If you know anything about Boise and USL, let us know. Las Vegas Lights coming off their first ever playoff appearance last year, beating the Tampa Bay Rowdies 1-0. Pinzon with the goal for Las Vegas. So the USL Championship underway. Very interesting league every year. Adding some teams is always part of the story. Again, Lexington going from League One to the championship is something to keep an eye on. I'll mention Sacramento just one more time, because what Sacramento did in the offseason was go and find a manager who has some success in this league, and Neil Collins. They brought him back from the UK after he had left Tampa to go, I believe, coach in Scotland, where he is from. 41 years old. I've had a lot of chances to talk to Neil Collins. He is a very low-key guy with a heavy Scottish accent, but he is a very, very good soccer coach. And I think this is going to bode well for Sacramento Republic out west. Again, so many games to play. It's hard to know what we can take away from any of these matches. If you have any thoughts on the USL Championship, we're always anxious to learn here on Morning Kickaround. So send us some thoughts, some messages, and hopefully in the near future we'll have some guests on to continue covering the USL Championship and everything that's going on there. All right, let's not belabor this. Again, solo Jason Davis on a Monday on Morning Kickaround. One big segment for you coming up. I saw an interesting post over on the X, and I think we need to talk about something here, which I'll get into. But let me remind you again that following the show, subscribing to the show, helps us out here on Morning Kickaround. Become an MK Ultra, and tell somebody you know. Tell a soccer friend, or share one of the episodes, share one of the videos that we have. There's a lot of choices there on Morning Kickaround's YouTube channel. You can do that. Follow us on social media at MKickaround, X, Instagram, Blue Sky. We may be in some other places in the near future. You can always hit us up there. If you want to follow me personally on Blue Sky, it's Davis Jason. I think if you type in those names, you should be able to find me. Reach out to us on email at morningkickaround@gmail.com. Send us a message, whatever you want to talk about on Morning Kickaround, whatever you want us to cover, any thoughts you have on the show, anything, even just a nice note that you like what we're doing is helpful. Sometimes we need to hear that you like what we're making. You can support us with a little bit of money at ko-fi.com/morningkickaround. You can do that as a one-time thing, or if you want to set up a recurring contribution, that would be very, very nice. So do that. Thank you very much. All right, so when we come back here on Monday Morning Kickaround, interesting post over on X, spotting a question. Let's get into the big question. All right, here it is. Monday's big question on Morning Kickaround. I was scanning social media as we do in 2025 because we're all super addicted, right? Right? We're all super addicted. Now, I am not personally on X, but I caught this on X because sometimes you just look around for news. I don't have the person's name here. I didn't include the handle. I think if you want to go find this tweet, you can, or post, or whatever you want to call it. This could be Chicago in American soccer, says this post. But instead, there's only one Division I team, and it's the Chicago Fire, and they are horrible. All right? An entire city being for just one team, and that, quote-unquote, grows the game, please. Hashtag ProRel for USA. Now, if you've been around American soccer long enough, and if you've been on social media, you know what hashtag ProRel for USA is all about. And I'm not unpacking that. That's not a thing. ProRel would be amazing in America. That's a statement of fact, I think, for a lot of us. How we go about making it happen, or how aggressive we are about how bad the way that we run American soccer is, I'll let you do that. I'll let you handle that yourself. What actually caught my eye about this is the map that this post includes, which is a map of London and all of its soccer clubs, all of its football clubs. And I don't need to name all of them. Some of you know a lot of these, right? I mean, this goes as deep as Dagenham and Redbridge, who I think is playing in the National League. I'm pretty sure Dagenham and Redbridge is playing in that. And I think that club is also owned by the same people who own Brooklyn FC, which we talked about on our expansion episode of USL Championship. So multi-club ownership, yay! But Crystal Palace, Fulham, Millwall, Queen's Park Rangers, Chelsea, obviously, Tottenham, obviously, Arsenal, obviously, Charlton Athletic. It goes on and on and on. AFC Wimbledon, which has its own unique history. Maybe we'll talk about that one day. So this is just a map of London with its many, many soccer clubs. And obviously the post is implying that if we had an open system in America, if we had ProRel, I guess that, again, we could have ProRel and not have an open system. And you'll know that from when we talked about the first division that USL wants to launch. They're not saying, we're going to launch the first division and then we're going to have an open system, because it's not up to them. Right? In America, we have businesses that operate as soccer leagues, and in order for there to be an open system, they would all have to get together and agree on how to work together, and it just isn't that way. So I think there are some hurdles to that. But if we imagined an open system, could we imagine an American city being like London? Is that possible? Now, there's just the obvious thing of like, oh, look how big New York is. New York could support a lot of teams if we had a ProRel open system. Now, okay, let's take apart, or let's examine that principle, or that theory at first. If we had ProRel, we could have a city that has clubs as deep as London has. Is that true? Meaning, why aren't there more clubs? Is that really the reason? Like, if you think about it, the reason there aren't more clubs in, say, New York City, which is the obvious candidate to replicate London if this could happen in America, is the reason there aren't more clubs because of ProRel. Because there isn't an opportunity to move up. And that if there was a chance to go from the 5th division to the 4th division, all the way up to the top division, more clubs would exist. I mean, we're kind of ignoring the fact here, when we look at this map, that every one of these clubs is something like 100+ years old. Like, every one of these clubs started in a very different world of football. Every one of these clubs started before television, before radio in most cases, before there was any, when a neighborhood soccer club was your only way to experience the game. Literally, you might be able to read about a game in the newspaper or see a score or buy a cigarette card, but you weren't going to be able to interact with the game in any other way except to go see your local club play. So I think when we talk about this and this idea that, oh, if only we had Pro Rel, this would happen, I think it misses a lot of that, right? The reasons why there were so many clubs in London is because every neighborhood needed a club. Every section of the city needed a club so that that section could engage with the game because they had no other way to do it. There was no other way to watch a football match except to go to your local or get on the train or get on the, I don't know, horse-drawn carriage? That was probably for rich people. I don't think the working class was getting in horse-drawn carriages to go across town to see their club play. So, I mean, I don't want to toss this out. Like, I don't want to throw it out and just say it's impossible because I don't think that's fun. I question some of the premise here. But I definitely think that we should be working towards the idea of having cities supporting multiple professional soccer clubs. Like, can we get there on our current path? Is that possible? Like, do we okay, let's I guess part of it too is, do we want this? Do we want this? Now, I'm also ignoring, right? So here's a local chopper. I believe that leagues in the US have one team per city. That's not always the case. Obviously there are, you have Chicago with a couple of baseball teams, you have New York with a couple of baseball teams. There is, though, this idea, again, because these are businesses largely, and especially in soccer, where you don't want competition within a city because that would hurt the possibility of success for either team you would have in that city, right? Territories. We've talked about this with USL. Like, exclusivity is a thing that owners want because why would they want to launch a club if they're going to have to compete with somebody else, right? If there's another team already in the market, it makes it harder to succeed in a sport in America that has always struggled with viability, right? So that's sort of this there's a pragmatic problem at place here, that we have a very different system of sports in general in the United States, and then soccer itself is still a tough sell in a lot of places, and then you're just talking about, like, what's the available oxygen? What's the available money? Who can you partner with? How can you be sustainable? How can you get, like, if you're competing for fans to come out to watch your games because there's multiple options for teams, then does that make it harder? I want this to be the case. I just don't know what we can do it without a time machine. And there's another major practical problem. Jack's film rule, I would say from an infrastructure standpoint, it would be highly infeasible because these teams are rooted in that city as opposed to taking teams and just implanting them in cities. So, again, you have a system here. You have a history here in London where all of these teams popped up when there was no other way to see the game, that every section of the city wanted to interact with the sport, right? Now, the reason not all these teams are first division teams is because of that, right? Because you just can't have teams. Not everybody is going to grow at that level over time, and it hasn't happened. There are some big teams in this mix, and there's some small teams in this mix. And I'm okay with the idea that we in our country can have teams at the lower division levels and also have teams at the upper division levels in the same area. Right? If that is a feasible thing in terms of the money, then we should be looking forward to that. If Pro Rel is necessary to make that happen, well, I don't know that it's going to. And when we talk about infrastructure, Man, how many soccer stadiums do we actually build as a country? I know it feels like we have this big rush of soccer stadiums coming, or MLS has done a good job of getting stadiums built. But if you had an open system and you said, okay, well, you can start a team in the 5th division and you can work your way up, where would these teams play? Would we be playing in high school stadiums, and then what? Then when they move up, right? People don't like the PLS because they think some of those rules are arbitrary. But you wouldn't want to have a first division team playing in a high school soccer stadium. You wouldn't want that. Right? Again, there's some modern considerations here that make it really difficult to imagine that this would happen even with Pro-Rel. But I like the idea of thinking about New York with multiple teams. And look, we've got NYCFC. You might not consider the Red Bulls a New York team, but they're not that far away, and they're in the metro, so across the river. Brooklyn FC is coming, supposed to. I know Queens is done. Queensboro FC is done, like cooked, shut down, destroyed, eliminated. I don't know. Wasn't David Villa involved in that? It was wild because it was a big Q. At this moment in American history, their badge was a big Q. That's just funny. It's funny to me. Like, yeah, I mean, I would love it. Another Brooklyn team, a Queens team, a Staten Island team. They got a stadium on Staten Island they can play some soccer on. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know. So keep those comments coming on if we want to get to this, what would it take? Right. And I'll also point out that when it comes to London, it is apples and oranges, because in America, we have other sports that are more important than soccer historically, that are going to make it more difficult for this to happen. Spectator sports were born out of the post-industrial revolution era, right? Like, as the Industrial Revolution happens, people have more time, they have more disposable income, spectator sports happen. And in England, football was king. Football was the only spectator sport that really mattered. I know they'll have rugby teams in town and stuff like that, but it's not even comparable. Obviously, here in America, not only did we have our own version of football, which became king, but we also had basketball. We also had baseball. Baseball, the oldest of our spectator sports. I mean, baseball fills the role in our history that football does, or soccer does, in England. And obviously, again, the way that sport developed because of ownership and franchises and that model rather than an open system club model, it's very different. But it set the tone for how we run our sports in America. So there's that. All right. Mark is saying, surprised you guys aren't talking about part 2 of the Tenorio Cardenas questionnaire of CSOs over on The Athletic. I'll be honest with you, Mark, haven't read it yet. Haven't had a chance to do that. So maybe on Wednesday's morning kick around, we can dive into that rather and do a little bit of a picking apart of what the CSO said, because I know that those guys always put in some very interesting questions. I did take a look at the first part, which was largely about who's going to win the league and who's the best player in MLS and who had the best offseason and things like that. And those are interesting questions, I guess. I mean, it's always interesting to see what CSOs think, but it's kind of prosaic in a way. So, yeah, this is where things get real interesting. Do you think MLS is taking full advantage of Messi in the upcoming 2026 World Cup? That's one question. Is fall to spring scheduling good or bad? This has been a big deal, right? Because MLS reportedly is seriously considering a switch. CSO is nearly unanimous that this would be a positive for MLS. One GM said he was not convinced it'll be good, but was hopeful it would be. I mean, that's interesting if it was nearly unanimous when obviously some of those CSOs work in places like Montreal and Minnesota. GMs in the northern market said it won't make everyone happy. Depends on which team you ask. The southern teams will say it's great. The northern teams are wondering how often the southern teams visit the north in the winter. Interesting. Club World Cup for Seattle and Miami, and how will they do? Seattle's probably not going to do very well. They've got PSG, Atletico Madrid, and Botafogo. Ouch. So, yeah, that's an interesting conversation that we can have on Wednesday. I don't want to burn through all of it. USL D1 came up as a question. Would it be a threat to Major League Soccer? I'll let you guess as to the answer. If you already have read the piece, then you already know. Internal cash market, how does that impact the league? One rule change that needs to happen. Ooh, this is going to be interesting. All right, we'll dive into that on Wednesday, I promise. All right. Appreciate you hanging out with me. Obviously, some interesting things to talk about here on a Monday, and I'm glad we got a chance to talk MLS and USL, Americans abroad, and all of those things. Again, reminder, please support the show, subscribe, and more important than just subscribing, go share the show with somebody or share a video that you liked. I know, again, I think we're hitting something with this, a lot of the USL coverage and the growth of the game, some of the expansion stories and things like that. I mean, we will talk about the soccer on the field, absolutely. But the story of soccer in America is the story of growth and the story of change, the story of leagues and expansion, all those things. And I think we can be a place for that. So if you like any of that, subscribe, join the MK Ultras, and share the show with somebody. You can always follow us, again, on social media at Kickaround, Instagram, Blue Sky, X, wherever you find your social media. We're likely to be there. I don't think we're a Facebook show, though. I don't think you're going to find us there. So sorry for your Uncle Ned, who's not going to be participating in Morning Kickaround on his preferred platform. And if you want to support the show with a little bit of money, you can do that at ko-fi.com/morningkickaround, as I do these out of order. You can set that up as a one-time thing or maybe throw us a little bit of money every month, up to you. Again, more ways to support the show will be coming on YouTube and elsewhere, I promise. You can reach out to us at morningkickaround@gmail.com. That's the email address if you're old school like me and like email. I currently have 41,151 unread emails in my inbox. Not all of those are important, so... But if you send a message to the Morning Kickaround inbox, I promise you it will be read and we will address it and get back to you. So there's that. All right, that's it. That's what we're doing on a Monday. Shout out to Robert, who couldn't be here. He will be back on Wednesday. We'll dive into that athletic survey of MLS GMs and hit up whatever else is happening in the world of football. So with all that said, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you soon.